Hey Chelsea fans, so welcome to another episode of Transfer Fridays. We generally do this on Tuesdays, but due to the special guest that we have today, we've decided to bring you guys this transfer special. And first off, let me introduce Rob Pratley, RJPJournalism. So people who are keyed into Chelsea Twitter and are active and follow transfer news, I'm sure you've come across Rob's mini transfer articles and reports. He's one of the best and the first people that I met on Chelsea Twitter. And whenever Rob's articles do pop up in our Chelsea WhatsApp groups, I always try to do a bit of name dropping and tell people that I used to write for him, but a lot of people don't believe me. So Rob, welcome to the stream, and to start off, please confirm that we do actually know each other.
Yeah, no, I can confirm that is true, and yeah, it's great to see catch up with sort of both of you again. Obviously, for various reasons, I think we lost contact a little bit in the last sort of good month, but yeah, it's really good to sort of catch up with both of you again. Two very good voices on Chelsea and two very good voices of reason, I think, in a strange and crazy transfer window.
Hey, thank you so much. And moving on to Vivek. So people who were on Twitter like 2 years back during the Lampard times will definitely know Vivek really well. He was one of the best writers that I've had the pleasure of interacting with, and he gave away an account that was almost like 9,000 followers because he didn't want
Yeah.
the noise of Twitter anymore, and that's something I'll always respect. And he's some guy I talk to almost every day on football. One of the best people I've met through Twitter. So thank you so much, Vivek, for taking the time out to do this.
Hey Akash, hey Rob, nice to see you, mate.
Yeah, pleasure to see you too. How are you doing? You well?
Yeah, all good, mate, all good. Looking
Nice.
forward to the Spurs match and probably some optimistic transfer news. it's it's been a bit of an up and down this transfer window for us.
That's very true. That's very true. I'm just gonna 1 second. I'm just gonna sort it out. Oh.
Sure thing. So while we wait for Vivek for Rob to come back,
Let a
so
bit of
this
natural
stream is
light in.
yeah, awesome. So this stream is probably going to be what me and Vivek do on WhatsApp for the most part. That is, ask Rob for transfer rumors that we hear and ask him to confirm them, right? So Rob's been kind
Yeah.
enough to hop on, and so to start off, let's start with the biggest rumor that's been on the saga that's been going on for the past couple of weeks, right? So. Uh, I know Rob was one of the first people to report our interest in Frankie De Jong, and it's been confirmed with multiple sources reporting it and taking it forward in the past few weeks. So, Rob, just to start off, your thoughts on the Frankie De Jong deal? Do you think it goes through? And why does Frankie have this sort of Stockholm syndrome when it comes to Barcelona? Why does he want to stay there?
So I sort of said this on a few podcasts at the moment. I don't really want to predict what happens with the De Jong situation because there's so many elements of Barcelona and moving parts that are hard things to understand. Barcelona as a case study at the moment will be a fascinating case study in football finances because it seems to be a case of looking at how much you can get away with before anyone actually bothers to call you up on it. Now, I will say that from Chelsea's perspective, they've liked De Jong for a while. There have been conversations before this window about Frankie De Jong. There were last summer, albeit they went nowhere. And Chelsea are very keen to ensure that if it's not going to happen, they want to know as soon as possible. Now, Barcelona don't really want to sell De Jong as priority, but they recognise he's worth a lot of money, and he also is on that crippling salary that is going to be the big issue for them. So consequently, they've been entertaining offers, at least privately, for the player. Manchester United have a fee agreed with Barcelona. However, the agent and the player have made it very, very clear they will under no circumstances move to Manchester United. They've got no interest in it. If Ten Hag wasn't there, they wouldn't even consider Manchester United. They wouldn't even listen. It's the fact Ten Hag is there. He thought about it, but he's got no interest in going. No Champions League football as well is obviously a big issue. So Chelsea's interest in De Jong stems back from the fact they'd like to bring in multiple midfielders because they know that Conte and Jorginho are both out of contract next summer. There is question marks over the longer-term future of Ruben Loftus-Cheek. There is interest in Conor Gallagher and other teams taking him away from the club. Mateo Kovacic is not getting any younger either. So they want to start planning for that next generation of midfielder. And Chelsea, ideally, in an absolute ideal world, would like two of, I think, Jude Bellingham, Declan Rice and Frankie de Jong as their first choice options. Now, I don't think that that's going to happen. I will go on and say I think if de Jong comes in, I think it'll be hard to get Declan Rice and vice versa. I think Bellingham is just going to be an absolute free-for-all next summer. It wouldn't surprise me if you're talking 100+ million for the player to even get a conversation started. Borussia Dortmund were very keen to not ensure there was no release clause in Bellingham's contract to ensure they didn't have a situation like Haaland or like some of the other players they've had to sell, like Sancho. But Chelsea's interest in De Jong is still there, and they've privately made it very clear they'll pay it. They will pay up for the wages that are missing, which is sort of the big elephant in the room. They will offer him a sort of significant salary. The issue is Chelsea will not formally make any sort of offer unless De Jong makes it clear he will accept the move. The club are not going to make a bid and then suddenly just get knocked back by De Jong, because they've already had that several times this summer. And they are getting to a point now where they want definitive answers. Barcelona want the same. They want him to either take a pay cut or leave. De Jong and his camp at the moment are happy to sit on their old contract. They know that legally they believe there's nothing Barcelona can do about it. He's very settled in the city. And he also finally feels that Barcelona have made signings to benefit him and the sort of players that are going to enhance his ability. So that's partly why I think De Jong wants to stay. It is worth probably noting that I think the first couple of weeks of the season could play a big part in this, in that Barcelona, if he doesn't start off playing often, if he's not playing very well at the start of the season, then I think the attempt to push him out might, enhance a little bit stronger. And certainly there have been reports in the last hour that, Barcelona wanted to have a meeting with De Jong's agent, who also is Braithwaite's agent, ironically, who they're also trying to move out of the club. Yeah. And the agent has just completely ignored it. And I'm told the lines of communication are very, very fraught. Now, yesterday there was the report coming in about Laporta trying to involve Pini Zahavi,
was it? Yeah.
Into the deal. Yeah. And Zahavi is someone who A, has worked with Laporta quite a lot, but B, also has a very good relationship with Chelsea. And certainly under Marina Granovskaya used to be, probably the first name agent in the books and the person who Chelsea would so often turn to in order to facilitate transfers. Now, the new ownership, I don't believe, have as strong a relationship with Zahavi. Again, they're still building that up. But I think it would have been a case that Zahavi is someone who there are still names in the Chelsea hierarchy who do recognise him. De Jong's agents have been very clear they don't want anyone else interfering. And I was told today by someone they think De Jong is most likely going to report Barcelona to Fifth Pro and take them to court over what he feels is slander and what he feels is sort of an issue. Now, it kind of depends on that. I think there's sort of a bit of a twofold manifest thing here of that. Will Barcelona be able to persuade him to take the wage cut before that happens? Will De Jong voluntarily take the wage cut before it happens? Will Chelsea look elsewhere, which again they already are? And, will De Jong show any impetus of wanting to move? Chelsea won't sit around and wait for this deal. This is not the sort of deal they're going to sit around and wait all summer to do. If not, then that's, going to not be a problem. The fourth lever is irrelevant to Frankie de Jong. They still apparently can't register everyone. And even with the fourth lever, they want de Jong's wages off the books because what I think is hard to understand with people, and I've explained this with de Jong's contract is written in a way that he had a reduced salary for the last couple of years, which they still haven't even paid him, but then it doubles this year. And so if you imagine that he's not on this, but let's just say he was on £200,000 a week, suddenly that's going up to £400,000 a week. There are several other players at Barcelona that took reduced salaries this summer and took reduced salaries in the last couple of years in order to get an increase in the future because Barcelona banked on being able to pay it and they can't. And the same is true with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, which is why they will consider offers for him.
So, Rob, I just wanted to add on to this De Jong saga. So I've been following Gerard Romero for the last 3 days. And out of all the Barcelona journalists who've been, following this, who've been keeping an eye on this news, Gerard Romero apparently is the only one who keeps insisting that Frankie de Jong will leave. And even last night, I think before 24 hours before, he mentioned that the fifth lever will be Frankie de Jong's sale. So do you have something to add to that, Rob? Because we all know how trustworthy Gerard Romero is. He's been incredibly trustworthy.
For Barca, for sure. This window, he's been crazy.
Yeah, he's been crazy. And whether you like it or not, whether you like him or not, you have to admit the guy is very, very trustworthy. Do you have something to add to that, Rob?
I don't like commenting on other sources, as I've always said. I don't consider it my place. At the end of the day, people have as much right to believe me as they do to believe anyone else. And if you hear something and think that's complete nonsense, then that's fine. You're welcome to think that, even if what I say is complete nonsense. I have no problem. But I will say that with De Jong, it's interesting that reports people like Relevo, who are very good in Spain, they are a very good publication, have said that, there's a situation now, it's come to a point where there's a head with De Jong and they need, an outcome. David Ornstein putting out that piece the other day about them threatening to sue De Jong effectively. When you're getting reports coming out like that by prominent mainstream journalists, it's quite clear there's something going on under the surface. And it's more getting to that point, I think, and working out exactly what the, what it's going to manifest as and how it's going to manifest. Now, I think it is quite interesting that Chelsea have made it very, very clear in terms of De Jong, they will not make an offer if they don't get that buy-in from De Jong. However, they have made it very clear that if they do get that buy-in, they will instantly put the money down. That's not, meeting the asking price is not the question. So it'll be really interesting to see how long Chelsea do wait on this now, because they do have other names that they do consider, and they do have other players, whether it's a cheaper midfield solution, someone like Mateus Nunes this summer. They've looked at Sergej Milinkovic-Savic before, and they could return to that. His agent certainly is not against moving him out of Lazio. There is other names, that are not as uptight at the moment, not necessarily as advanced, but the sort of things that could be advanced quite quickly. There is still residual interest in Declan Rice, although, I'd be amazed if anything happened with that this summer. But financially, there is the money there. If Chelsea wanted to try and make something happen, if they got the encouragement that, putting 100 million on the table would do it, they could do that financially. It's more of a case, I think, that Chelsea really want to explore De Jong, because that's the player who not only does the owner want, the manager really wants. And Tuchel tried to sign him at PSG. So.
True, yeah. Okay. So again, if we were to sum it up, the other options would be, let's say, Mateus Nunes would be like top priority. And also, we've registered interest in Milinkovic-Savic and other names as well, right? So.
Yeah, I wouldn't try and conflate priorities into it, because I think it's quite. There's a case that Chelsea don't really have a priority besides Frenkie de Jong. He is sort of the top name, but there is interest in Nunes, there is interest in Milinkovic-Savic, but the club are not going to directly sort of, there are other names on the list, but again, at this moment in time, we're not that advanced enough with it. But it is the sort of thing, as we've seen with Cucurella, where if deals do break down with other clubs, Chelsea can go right in there, and they are very prepared this summer to pay asking prices. That's, I think, the biggest change with the new ownership, is there's not much quibbling over price tags.
It's a welcome change, to say the least. So.
Yeah, that's very true. And moving on, Rob, from the midfielder situation, we go to the big elephant in the room, Wesley Fofana. Can you give our audience an insight as to where this deal is? Because we've been hearing about this third bid for a good 3-4 days now. Any insight as to where it is right now?
I would try and move away from the concept of bids with this offer, because all the way through there has been constant dialogue with Leicester, and there's been pretty constant conversation ongoing. It's more of a case that Chelsea are now getting to a point where they want to agree a financial package and say, this is the deal, this will be done, this is how much it's going to cost, rather than making bid after bid after bid. If they make bid after bid after bid and Leicester reject it publicly, you then get the media storm around it. And Chelsea are quite keen on trying to keep this cost down. Leicester have rejected a couple of offers so far, and Chelsea don't want to keep, just having rejected offers in the news. They don't want it to keep, being the story. They want to be able to do things quite quietly and quite quickly, like they did with Koulibaly, and to a point with Marc Cucurella, actually. Now, I do think this one is more likely to happen than De Jong, because I think the player himself might start to push a little bit more. I think, Chelsea want to try and get players out, but once they start moving some players out, I think Alonso, they wanted to get out. They want to get Malang Sarr out. They want to sort Ampadu's loan out. They want to bring in that centre-back. And I just think, Chelsea will. It's interesting, Brendan Rodgers' tone did change. He went from, not for sale to, offers have come in, and we'll have to see what happens. And I always say during a transfer window, ignore whatever a manager says about any player and, whether they're available or not. Because ultimately the manager says one thing, the board thinks something else, and the manager will think something else in private, and every single player will have a price tag.
Makes perfect sense. And just to sort of get a bit more perspective into this, right? So similar to, let's say, Nunes or Milinkovic-Savic, are there other names that Chelsea are actively tracking for this specific role of, centre back and right centre back?
There are, again, they're not anywhere near advanced. Chelsea would consider a bid, I think, for Milan Skriniar if Inter Milan did make it clear what they might accept, they would consider Skriniar. Mohamed Simakan is another player who Chelsea have looked at, and ironically, that's who PSG are turning to because they don't think Skriniar is going to happen. The club would really like Josko Gvardiol, but again, Gvardiol won't happen this summer. But he is definitely someone to sort of keep an eye on in the medium, longer term. And then there are a couple of names that are further sort of down the list, people like Max Kilman that are seen as very versatile options at centre-back who could kick on. But again, they're coming from Premier League clubs and they're English, so you've got the premium of the price tag on there. There is one or two other young players as well who sort of the Chelsea are scouting are more not immediate long-term solutions, but people like Ronnie Edwards at Peterborough, for example, who the club want to be in a situation where they buy players in and they have them ready for, say, in 2 or 3 years' time. Because one thing they really found problematic this year, the new owners coming in, is the fact that Rudiger was leaving, Christensen was leaving, a number of other players wanted to all go, and suddenly there weren't ready-made replacements and sort of oven-ready replacements to come in. And they want to have those young players in place going out on these pathways. And I understand, you know, people like Amari Hutchinson, Carney Chukwuemeka have had conversations with Neil Bath and with Tuchel about what sort of, you know, pathway they have and what goes on. And it really depends on, you know, what pathway is offered as to whether they sign or not.
Makes sense. And just before we move on to the next topic, I'm just highlighting this comment. Rob, this is proof that you're big in India, and I'm dropping again.
I do appreciate it, and again, I appreciate everyone who's, you know, tuned in today or is tuning in on the replay. Thank you very much for taking your time.
So Rob, before we move on to outgoings, like I have this question to ask. Like you did mention to me and Akash a few days back that we can expect something like Carney Chukwuemeka. The club are looking at some sort of a secret deal and something can happen. And is there anything on that right now? Or do you have a name? If you can greenlight anything right now, Rob?
In terms of the left field name?
Yeah.
All I can say at the moment is it's an attacking player. It's someone who is it's a winger, it's a young winger, and it's someone who I think is they're very raw, but they're the sort of player the club might look to bring in, might bite the bullet on paying a big fee on them now in order to bring them in on the basis they think they're going to kick on. However, at the same time, if they do come in, I think it probably would mean Hudson-Odoi would leave on a permanent deal, because I think they're quite similar to Hudson-Odoi in the nature of the player they are, albeit the fact they play on the right. And I think that's, you know, going to be the sort of thing. That's the thing at the moment that stopped the club from pushing the nuclear button. They know how much it would cost. They know the player is interested in the move. Again, until Hudson-Odoi's situation is sorted, Ziyech's situation needs to be addressed. Pulisic wants to go. Until all of the attackers sort themselves out and that logjam sort of clears, then they won't do anything. And
I know.
Indeed, I think the most likely attacking signing at this moment in time is going to be the striker, because that's who Tuchel really, really wants and wants to push for.
I know Vivek is itching to ask you for a name, but I'm gonna let Vivek go ahead and make a couple of guesses, and you can gauge from Rob's expression if that's the right name or not.
So Rob,
right winger similar to Hudson-Odoi. Go for it, Vivek. Two guesses.
So off the top of my head, the two names which comes Pedro Neto and Jarrod Bowen.
Nope, neither of those. The club the club have scouted Jarrod Bowen quite significantly, and they do like him as a player. But again, Bowen himself is also quite settled at West Ham, and it would cost a king's ransom to get him from West Ham. Pedro Neto, again, bizarrely, there were a lot of reports about Pedro Neto wanting to leave Wolves. I didn't really understand these because I've been told he's very settled, he's happy. The club is still waiting on him fully to come over his injury that he's had, and you know, still fully getting back to full fitness. And although he is very, very talented, Pedro Neto, he still is relatively young and inexperienced in Premier League terms, and Wolves would demand, you know, 70, 80 million for him. On Michael Elise, a lot of people ask me about Michael Elise. He previously was in the Chelsea Academy. He left to go to Reading. His brother is still in the Academy. I do know for a fact that if Chelsea did make an offer for Michael Elise, he would make the move, because he was really keen on making the move before he went to Crystal Palace. And he privately has made it very clear he'd like to go back to Chelsea. At this moment in time, I don't know if there's any real interest in the player. Again, it doesn't really strike me as a Thomas Tuchel sort of attacker. But again, you know, surprising things do happen. I know Crystal Palace were keen on trying to get him to sign a new deal because he has a release clause in his old contract. I don't know if that deal ever got signed. I know there was a lot of negotiations. It might be a case they're just waiting to announce it. But at this moment in time, I don't think anything's going to happen with Elise this window. He's also injured at this moment in time, I believe. So
Great player though, as in if our club was to move towards those signings, right, especially in attack, I think Olise, he can, carry the ball. He can beat people on both sides. He's like the kind of player I want Chelsea chasing. But like you mentioned, not
yeah,
likely that we go for him this window.
the
And
club,
yeah,
the player that I could say that for 100% the club would have gone for if he'd been fully fit this summer was Federico Chiesa. They were really, really keen on signing Chiesa. There was a lot of conversations between the club and Chiesa's agent. Juventus are in a position where they financially are looking to shuffle about their attack, and although Chiesa wasn't someone they desperately wanted to sell, they knew that there could be big bids coming in for him. And his injury effectively did put the kibosh on that. Did really put the kibosh on that. But if he did recover well, then Sane won't happen this summer. The time I'll come on to Sane in a second, but the time for him was last summer if Chelsea were going to make something happen. With Chiesa, I think if he recovers well from his injury, you'll see a bid for him probably next summer. Regarding Sane, the time to sign him was last summer when he wasn't really very settled in Germany. He now feels a bit more settled back in there. He's now more settled in the system. Bayern don't consider him completely not for sale, but he's just very, very, very expensive. And I don't think Chelsea will bite the bullet on someone who previously didn't settle in England. That's why he left Manchester City, because he didn't settle in England very well. And he gets very homesick. There's also been concerns over his fitness due to sort of more recurring and regular injuries. But someone else mentioned, I think that's probably meant to be in Nkunku next summer. Like there will be a big, free for all. A lot of clubs next summer will be interested. There's the release clause in there. Chelsea do have a good relationship with RB Leipzig, so it is possible, something might be able to be done. But at the same time, I know, RB Leipzig didn't want to sell him this summer. They rejected several very, very significant verbal offers from clubs where clubs said,
did Chelsea bid as well, or was that hearsay?
For verbal offers, there were, Chelsea made their interest known, Liverpool made their interest known, PSG made their interest known, Real Madrid made their interest known, through a variety of different verbal offers made in. And effectively, Leipzig said, he's going to sign a new deal. We're putting in the release clause. He's getting sold next summer. And that's often what they agree with young players. And with players who want to go. The same happened with Werner. Werner signed a new deal the summer before he left with a release clause, and that's often how they'll try and do it. What I will say with Nkunku that might be a bit of an interesting wild card is it wouldn't surprise me if someone tried to agree a deal in January for the summer on a higher cost before the release clause kicks in, and that might be something to watch. There is a lot of interest in the player, and I think if he has another good season, people will see the outlay as worth it. Victor Osimhen, the club do really like Victor Osimhen. He's someone who the club has scouted for a long time. A very special person that the club has recommended him to the club before. Chelsea did consider him before he joined, when he left Lille. Napoli signed him for an awful lot of money. I believe the
75 million or something, right?
75 million pounds, yeah.
The investigation into his transfer is still going, is still ongoing at this moment in time. And so, consequently, until that concludes, I don't think anyone will touch him. I was very interestingly told that if they did sell Victor Osimhen this summer, and it was something that Chelsea would be right in there if he was available, and they have something of a bargaining chip in that their first choice replacement they want is Armando Broja, and he is the person they would like to replace Osimhen. So that's sort of an interesting caveat to watch. Someone mentioned Paulinho. He only just joined Fulham, so that won't happen this window. Adama Traore, his agent is trying to get him a move again from Wolves after he has this delusions of grandeur, his agent, that he should be playing for some top side. He's very cheap this window, despite what Wolves previously... you could probably get him for around 10 million. His issue is he doesn't want to play wing back. He wants to play as a winger, and he doesn't really offer the end product as a winger. I think Adama Traore is a very, very, very average player. He's a sprinter, not a footballer. And I don't think Chelsea will bite on it. Rafael Leao, someone else has said there. Yeah, Rafael Leao, I don't think it'll happen this window. He's too expensive. The club do really like the player, and there have been broad discussions with AC Milan over a number of players where Leao has come up, and other players have come up in the discussion. This also involved the Ziyech discussions. But AC Milan are steadfast in not wanting to sell him. If he doesn't sign a new deal, then maybe next summer. but Milan wanted to sign a new deal, ideally with a very, very, very big release clause that if anyone wants to trigger, they can. But it's the sort of thing that, you're talking 150 million plus euros plus release clause.
Okay.
But
So,
again, I
Rob,
think
before
this is
we
probably go ahead, Vivek. I'll pitch in after
sorry,
you. So.
Akash. Yeah,
No
so
worries, no
before
worries.
we move on to the next question, I just wanted to ask you about Sasha Kaladzic, if I'm pronouncing the name right. I believe you gave this exclusive last afternoon on Simon's page. So, is there anything of concrete interest on Sasha Kaladzic?
Sasa Kaladzic.
Yeah, his name is a tongue twister.
We'll go for Sasa to make it short.
Okay,
so
Sasha, yeah.
in terms of Kaladzic, he is someone who the club have been offered before. He was considered last summer as a replacement, as a sort of a backup striker last year when they were looking to try and bring two in. The club do really like him, and he does have a £20 million release clause for clubs in European competition, which does make him quite appealing. The problem is he does want assurances on minutes and how much he's going to play. His agent more recently this week, without Stuttgart's permission, has offered him to Manchester United. He's been offered to Tottenham as backup to Harry Kane. His agent, is offering him around the houses. Interestingly, Stuttgart do have a replacement in mind in Joshua Zirkzee from Bayern Munich, and they have started the initial procedures to get Joshua Zirkzee in. And I think it would be a case once Zirkzee comes in, they would be free to allow Kaladzic to go. Now, whether Chelsea go after Kaladzic, I think depends. Firstly, the primary target for a striker is Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. He's the one who Tuchel really wants and the club are backing. However, if they did choose to look at this Plan B option, or indeed if Armando Broja did leave, I think you'd probably see you'd probably see Kaladzic getting mentioned again. The caveat with him is that obviously with that release clause, it means there's a lot of clubs that can trigger it. But it was really interesting that Kaladzic was the player who Bayern Munich considers the stopgap for Robert Lewandowski while they develop Matisse Tell, but they've now decided against that.
So again, I think this is probably a good segue into the attacker section, right? So I think it's one area of our squad that will see a lot of outgoings. So like you mentioned, and you've mentioned multiple times, Pulisic wants to leave for sure. Ziyech is almost, he has his foot out the door, and there's talk for as in Armando Broja. I think there's still interest in him. Conor Gallagher might leave to West Ham. So there's multiple players that are in various stages of Hudson-Odoi as well. So just wanted to get yours and Vivek's thoughts, as in, at the end of the window, where do you think these players will be, and who do you think their replacement? I know it's like a very broad question that could take a while to answer, but just wanted to get your thoughts there. And just before you start, this is a friend of mine, so I'm just going to highlight his comment.
Sure.
He wants to know
while I'm thinking about your question, I'll answer the Ronaldo question. So Ronaldo, in his mind, certainly views himself as available. And he has made it very, very clear to Manchester United he wants to leave, he wants to play Champions League football. He views this as probably his last year at the absolute top, and he doesn't want to be playing in the Europa League. Manchester United are enduring a very, very difficult transfer window, and from a political point of view, the Glazers really don't want to see Ronaldo go because it means they will lose an awful lot of sponsorship revenue. They promised a lot of sponsors that they would be able to benefit from Ronaldo and use Ronaldo in their sort of marketing. And so there's one aspect of it. On the flip side, Todd Bowley would really like to see Ronaldo come to Chelsea for the marketing potential and also for the fact it's a blockbuster name and also due to the fact that he is a proven goalscorer. However, Thomas Tuchel is really against Cristiano Ronaldo because he doesn't feel he fits into the system at all, and he feels that it's not a long-term solution and it's probably more likely to antagonise and block players out, plus the wages will be significant. Now, I think I won't completely rule out Ronaldo, because I think if there's a situation where Chelsea are really, really struggling to score goals and it comes towards the end of the window and Ronaldo becomes available for loan, as his agent is now trying to do, then I think Chelsea will consider it. I think, Ronaldo would be happy at the outcome, would be happy to go to Chelsea. However, at this moment in time, the club are more focused on Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, as I've sort of said. Aubameyang, Barcelona aren't necessarily directly trying to sell him, but they are conscious that, again, he's another player who's now on big wages. He's a player who I think is 32, 33. He's not a long-term solution. And they don't want a situation in a couple of years' time where they have both him and Lewandowski on the books at 35, 36, and both of them on significant wages, very hard to move on and effectively sitting on their contracts. Tuchel really wanted to bring in Aubameyang in January and was really, really keen on the player, but the club did block it at the time. This time, I understand the summer they'd be more keen on looking at it. Barcelona are quoting about £20 million for the player. However, I think Chelsea would want to try and explore it. The other caveat is Barcelona ideally only want to sell one of him or Depay, but at the moment with Depay has a broad agreement with Juventus, but Depay wants to leave on a free transfer rather than pay a transfer fee, and Juventus is keen on trying to sort of manipulate that.
He's
So
trying to get the contract terminated or
Yes,
something from.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
effectively, yes. And Depay would like to be given the permission to leave on a free transfer, effectively. So the longer that situation drags on, the more I think Chelsea will try and maybe experiment with Aubameyang. But again, they'll need to be quick with this one because it will get to a point where Barcelona just won't sell. What is interesting with Aubameyang, and I did say this on the stream, is that Barcelona do also have Lewandowski, Rafinha, Dembele, Fati, Ferran Torres, and other youngsters that can play. Pablo Torres as well, other youngsters that can play in that role. And so Aubameyang might be a player they'd be more willing to sacrifice.
Okay.
Going back to the point about attackers that are going to be there and leave. Again, Chelsea would happily clear the decks of all of them. As I sort of said this at the beginning of the window, they would happily pretty much rip up the decks and start again. I think Pulisic will probably end up staying because I don't think anyone will meet the price tag this late in the window. I think one of Ziyech or Hudson-Odoi will stay, probably against their will, because the club, unless the club can bring in multiple attackers just because of how long it takes. And then the other one will leave either on loan if it's Hudson-Odoi or a permanent with Ziyech. If I was to guess at the moment, it's more likely to be Hudson-Odoi out on loan and Ziyech staying just because his wages are so significant. That's the issue with Ziyech, is getting off the wage bill. Whereas you have Timo Werner, who was very keen to go and actually took a very, very high wage cut in order to go back to RB Leipzig. Ziyech's negotiations with AC Milan, when they asked about a wage cut, didn't really break, and it didn't really get anywhere. So
I think
So
Rob just
adding
got
to
Yeah, go ahead, Vivek.
he's here. So Akash, answering your question, I think I'll agree with Rob on everything. So Pulisic, I don't think he'll leave this summer. I think he'll be competing with Sterling on the left wing. I still think Ziyech will leave. There was a lot of talk from Samuel Luckhurst, who was mentioning that United were looking at Ziyech, but I believe the board are really not considering backing Ten Hag over this because they don't want Ziyech. I don't know what the reason is. I think maybe Rob said, the wages might be a problem for United, and probably he's not. He's too old. He's probably touching his 30s, so might not look too much of an attractive deal. But I still think Hudson-Odoi will leave on a permanent deal because he is somebody ever since the start of his Chelsea career has always been linked with a move out of the club. So we had it with Bayern Munich, and now I believe he'll probably leave on a permanent more than on a loan. And this permanent deal will happen against the will of the club. This is just my prediction, but I still think that Hudson-Odoi will leave on a permanent, and we will probably sign Rob's
But Rob,
mystery attacker.
So is this to Dortmund that we're as in the permanent deal for
Dortmund won't be
Callum?
signing
No, whichever club comes in for him. Yeah.
Okay.
Dortmund don't have any that much interest in Hudson-Odoi. It was reported the other day. I was a bit confused by the report because about 2 hours or about 20 minutes later, it was just immediately pushed away by the club. Barcelona apparently say that a player with a medium-high salary will leave in the next few hours. So
wow.
Okay. I mean,
that's
probably not De Jong. It might be Aubameyang.
That's probably Braithwaite as well. Right? Braithwaite is on big wages too.
Yeah, it's interesting. Relevo are now reporting about Aubameyang that Chelsea are willing to pay about 15 million euros for Aubameyang, and also Aubameyang is interested in the offer. Be interesting to see what does manifest with that.
Yeah, because Dan McCarthy on the podcast was very insistent that we would not sign Aubameyang. He said that his sources mentioned that he would not be signing Aubameyang, and I guess if Tuchel wants Aubameyang, I think the club should give it to him because both of them have worked together, and Aubameyang has always done well under a manager who really trusts the player. So I think Tuchel can probably look at that as a short-term fix, for this window.
I think a lot of people are freaked out after the All or Nothing release, right? They see the other episode and they're like, we do not want this anywhere near our squad. I think that's one school of thought because
that's there. But again, Arteta never really had that much of a connection going with Aubameyang. That is also true. There have been a lot of issues, and yeah, you can say that his attitude is a problem, and he might be a disruptive player. But I still think that like if he gets along with Tuchel and Tuchel really trusts that the player will not be a negative influence in the dressing room, I think we should go for the player. Like give Tuchel
For
what he
sure.
wants because yeah,
It was like 6 years back, 6 or 7 years back, but he did hit like 26 goals in the Bundesliga
yeah, he did.
under.
Yeah, he
But
did.
he had someone like Mkhitaryan laying it on for him. I think Mkhitaryan had like 20 assists, if I'm not wrong,
Yeah,
that season.
Yeah,
So
Mkhitaryan
correct.
and Shinji
yeah,
Kagawa. Shinji Kagawa was also playing for the team.
Marco
Ilkay
Reus. Yep.
Gundogan. Ilkay
Which is
Gundogan.
why I think
They were a fantastic team.
Rob
Yeah.
made an amazing point. I think yesterday there's a lot of criticism, obviously, around our lack of final third patterns or whatever. But I think Rob was just saying, bring in one-on-one dribbler, one attacker, and the entire face of of our attack changes. Right? You
Very true.
you
Yeah.
immediately have more options on and off the ball. You have people who will actually show initiative when they get the ball. I think that's a very very fair point, and I think our fan base misses out on that context quite a bit when it comes to these
Correct.
debates. Yeah.
Correct. Someone asked you about Marcel Alonso. As far as I'm concerned, the move at Barcelona is done. I think Tuchel said today he's been allowed to go finalise his transfer. To Chelsea's opinion, that's done. That's why that Tuchel made it pretty clear he wasn't in the matchday squad. He's not in the squad for Tottenham. I'd be very, very, very surprised now if it does break down. And if it does break down, he'll still be allowed to go because the club feel that they've got Cucurella in as the replacement. They've got Ben Chilwell. They're happy to sell both Alonso, Emerson, Baba Rahman. They've said, if you can sort yourself out of the club, we will release you from your contract. Ian Martin has gone out on loan. It is quite interesting that, they're quite bullish, I think, Chelsea, about actually rescinding some contracts this summer and have actually said, to players, if you don't sort out your futures, we will sort it out for you. Because they don't want, loads of players going out on loan again this year who aren't young players.
I think this is one concern a lot of
No.
people. I've seen voice. No worries there, right?
No,
Nothing to.
Yeah.
there's a very very good piece on if you're subscribed to the Athletic by Kieran. It was earlier this week by Simon Johnson. That had Kieran Maguire, who is the football finance expert. Again, I should make it as a clear. One of my big rules in football is I don't talk about football finances because it confuses people. And if I did work in football finances, I wouldn't be here. I'd be sat on a beach right now because of the salary I'd be making. But it is sort of one of those sort of things where FFP in itself is a bit of a sham anyway. But Chelsea have such a strong situation on it because of the sales they've made, because of the COVID buffer that you've got, and because of the fact that they've traditionally actually they technically don't have any debt at the moment at the club. Or we didn't have any debt before this window due to the very bizarre way our books have sort of been written off during the sale. So yeah, don't worry about FFP. A lot will be made of it. Chelsea will probably have quite a big summer this year, and they may have a leaner summer next year. But the fact they have a leaner summer will be more due to the fact that they'll try and be more implicit in their scouting and be more focused, be more data driven, and really identify the targets early on.
Makes perfect sense. And I think this is again something that me and Vivek have discussed as well, as in the
Will
position
we
of
be
right wing
signing
back.
another?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
another right wing back.
If you'd have asked me this about about a week ago, I'd have said maybe, because there was a lot of interest in Dumfries, there was a lot of interest in Walker Peters. However, with Azpilicueta renewing, I think he probably is that de facto extra right wing back for the season. They also have Loftus-Cheek who can cover there. Hudson-Odoi can cover there, even though he doesn't like playing there.
Yeah.
There's been quite a lot internally, I'm told, of debating about Livramento's buyback clause next summer. And, if they sign a right wing back, will that pretty much effectively mean that can't happen? Now, with Dumfries, Inter Milan's price tag for him is so high. And if it came down by about maybe 10, 15 million euros, the club might consider it, but at the moment they consider it far too high. With Walker Peters, the fee that was quoted for Carl Walker Peters is about twice as much as what Chelsea valued him at. And they just balked at it as a result of that. Now, I think it's more likely this year you will see a case that the club won't bring in a right wing back. They'll make do. They'll find solutions. They will bring players in, have players cover that, and then next summer they will make quite a concerted effort to either bring up Livramento or bring a right wing back in. They also have people in the academy like Dion Rankin who've sort of been impressing recently.
Yes.
Yeah, we saw him lay on an assist as well. I'm guessing the recent match against Wolves, Rankin had a good game there as well. And I'm sure the score. I think a friend of ours is listening
Was
into the
7-1.
stream, and yeah, and the score will be very very happy to hear that we do have plans for Livramento
Yeah.
getting him back into the squad. So yeah.
Yeah, a good friend of us is listening to the show, Vilas.
Yep. And what else did we have on the agenda? I'm just looking at. So again, Conor Gallagher, Rob, your view, as in, do you think he stays in the squad, considering that he wants to play as an advanced eight, be in and around the box, but we don't have that, spot for him in the squad. So.
I wouldn't say that Gallagher definitely wants to play there. Like, I've been told by someone Gallagher's really keen to make it work at Chelsea. However, it sort of happens, and whatever he has to do for it, he's an incredibly driven guy. He's waited a long time to make this happen, and I think it's more likely that he will sit around and will try and wait, and he will only leave the club if it becomes really, really clear he's not going to be involved. Tuchel talked up him quite a lot in pre-season. He talked of his loan spell. I wouldn't rule out completely a formation change at some point if the club got the right players in and got the players in that Tuchel wants to come in, and that might suit Gallagher better. It's a case that if he wanted to go this window, he's already had a lot of very good offers, both permanent and loan deals, and he's turned every single one of them down, so he wants to make Chelsea work. And I don't think unless another midfielder comes in, unless something dramatically changes, he's going to change his opinion.
Makes perfect sense.
So moving away from transfers, I believe we have everything covered. So coming back to the Tottenham game, so we'd like to know what your predicted lineup would be and the score for the game.
All right, so I was on another podcast. So I said a 1-1 draw yesterday, and I'm still not moving away from the 1-1 draw. I think it'll be a bitty, scrappy game. Chelsea, I think, will be try and break Tottenham, sort of stop Tottenham doing what they want to do. Tottenham, I think, will be happy to take a point from Stamford Bridge, seeing as they have such a poor record there. Conte is Conte. Mike Dean is on the VAR, and Taylor's refereeing it, which means there's inevitably going to be some form of absolute nonsense at some point. And I think the lineup will probably be Mendy, Azpilicueta, Silva, Koulibaly as the back three. I think it will be James and Cucurella at wing back. Again, Tuchel talked up to Cucurella again today in his press conference, and I think they might go with Cucurella for his pace to handle Kulusevski a bit better. Then in the midfield, obviously, we now know Kovacic is injured. I originally went for Kovacic in my lineup, but I think with Kovacic's injury, it will be Kante and Jorginho in sort of the engine room. And then as the front three, I think it will be Sterling, Mount, and then Havertz. But I would like to see Broja given a shot through the middle. Broja really did a lot of damage to Tottenham last year when he was alone at Southampton against them, and his ability to sort of run through. Someone else is James, right centre back, and RFC right wing back. I can't really see the club doing that. I think they'll want to go for the defensive stability of Azpilicueta and James in there, seeing as they'll be up against him and Son will try and drop into that sort of space. Alternatively, they might go for James at right centre back and then Azpi wing back and forego the attacking side on the right in order to block off Heung-min Son and shuttle him into the middle. But yeah, I mean, I'd really like to see Broja get the chance sort of through the middle, but I don't think he will play. Someone asked about Chukwuemeka. I think he might be on the bench, but they've been keen on trying to get his fitness up and building his fitness up. Again, he's still a really, really young guy. It might be a little while before we see Carney Chukwuemeka, but I have been told by someone who I've got no reason to doubt again that Chukwuemeka will be, quite important and quite big in the sort of medium to longer term in the season.
That's great news. As in, we expected him to either go out on loan or something, right? But hearing that we do have plans for integration into the squad, maybe within this year or next year.
Yeah, great.
Cool.
I think he isn't. He definitely isn't going to go out on loan this season. I think if he goes out on loan, it will be because another midfielder comes in and they maybe can't get players out. But they were really keen on keeping him at the club.
Makes perfect sense. I think there's a lot of people saying we should sell Pulisic. Might happen, might not happen, like Rob has mentioned. And I think, we're pretty much at the end of everything that we wanted to discuss. Rob, just putting you on the spot again. Your predictions on incomings and outgoings by the end of the season, purely, even if it's something outlandish, we'd like to hear. So by the end of the window, who do you think comes in? Who do you think leaves? And I'll ask the same question to Vivek as well after. So.
Sure.
By the end of the window, I was told by someone, I was told by someone who I had no reason to doubt that a striker would come in, Fofana would come in, and then there'd be one other signing. I'm also not including people like Cassidy in this and Ronnie Edwards, who are being signed very much for the development sort of squad. I think it'll be 3 more signings, and I think it'll be Fofana, the attacker, and then one other. It will be interesting, especially this Aubameyang stuff. I mean, allegedly, Gerard Romero's just said something about Aubameyang. Frankie de Jong said again that, Xavi said again about Frankie de Jong, we'll see because the market is open and we don't know what will happen with players. Yeah, it's sort of one of those things. You don't really know at this moment in time. I also do like to say to people, like, transfers can change on an absolute, on a sixpence. I mean, there was a player that up until this morning, I was told and was nailed on to be going to Arsenal women, and this afternoon she's decided to sign for Chelsea, with both players having offers on the table. Now, partly that's due to the fact that Emma Hayes' pull is, bigger than that of the gravitational Earth, but also, transfers are unpredictable. They're messy. I've sat before with a player who, or had an agent before. I've been talking to him, and he said, the player's in for a medical and doing a medical, and it's going to be signed. And I was going to be doing, an interview with him afterwards. And then about 20 minutes later, I get a message saying, the move's off. They've pulled the plug. He passed the medical, but they've pulled the plug on it. So it's so unpredictable and wild. Just one thing I do always say to people, if, things do change in a window, it's not people trying to pull the wool over your eyes. It's just the fact things do change like that. And sometimes things like the Cucurella deal, for example, when someone texted me on that morning and said Chelsea are hijacking Cucurella, who is someone who, is quite a good source for me, but isn't 100%, I sort of went back to him with a load of laughing faces, so I thought he was taking the piss. And then a couple of hours later, he was like, you're right. And I was like, fair play. And he sort of said, yeah, but I can understand why you were sceptical because I didn't think they were going to meet the price tag either. And with the new ownership, Chelsea is spending so much on it and are willing to spend so much on it. I mean, I think it's a case this window where they really want to show that they're backing Thomas Tuchel, and that's why things like Aubameyang is being considered when, normally the club would have vetoed that last year under the old ownership because there's no resale value and there's been problems before. But it's clear that, this is very much Thomas Tuchel's pick.
Makes sense. Vivek, your thoughts? Who do you think we end up signing before the end of the
I
window?
think we'll sign Fofana for sure. Next week, Fofana should be a Chelsea player. I won't be surprised if he starts versus Arsenal because it was always a given that if nothing happens this week, he's going to start versus Arsenal. So I believe Fofana will be one of the players coming in next week. Secondly, I think it will be Aubameyang because, while we were doing the stream, Gerard Romero did mention that there was a medium-high wage player leaving Barcelona, and the medium-high wage bill right now, the players who want to leave, it's probably Aubameyang. I think Aubameyang will be a Chelsea player very soon. And the third player, I believe, it will be Rob's mystery winger, whoever it is. I think that winger will come in to replace Hudson-Odoi. I don't think we'll sign a midfielder. I'm very pumped for Frankie de Jong. I really want that guy to come to Chelsea, but honestly, seeing the news over the last 2 days and especially with Rob, if Rob is very pessimistic about the deal, it usually never happens.
I wouldn't say I'm pessimistic about the deal. I'd say I'm realistic about the deal.
Yeah. So
exactly. I think Rob was pessimistic about Kunde, if we remember right. I think the day before Romero came in, he was like, my gut feeling is this doesn't happen, and it didn't happen. So we have no reason to doubt Rob's gut.
And I was speaking to Rob on Simon's page too, and he was one of the only few who said Kunde may not happen. My gut feeling is that it won't happen. So if I were to take Rob's gut feeling into account for Frankie de Jong, I don't think the deal will happen. And I think we'll get Declan Rice next summer, and we won't go for much of a midfield revamp this summer. So my 3 picks would be Rob's mystery attacker, Aubameyang, and Fofana.
Perfect. And yep, I think that's pretty much everything we wanted to cover. I know Vivek has to wake up at 5 tomorrow, and Rob has a very busy schedule to get back to. So thank you so much, guys. This was so much fun, and thank you everyone who got involved in the comments as well. We'll continue to pester Rob for more transfer updates over and till he blocks us, and we'll keep trying to bring those on the channel. So thank you so much, guys. And again, thank you. See you guys soon.
See you guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.